we've been recently scheming a creative way of trying to bring about some justice in Singapore, where domestic workers aren't given a single day off, and they're pretty much slaves. And so we have a thing that we're doing where we're sending some stuff to a whole bunch of the mega churches in Singapore to try to raise awareness and say, doesn't the Bible say to give a Sabbath to men servants and maid servants? Aren't they not to have a day off? And so in getting together all the information for these churches, I've been looking at the top 10 mega churches in Singapore and on their websites. And I've had to walk away with the deduction that all 10 of those churches, all their language on their website was like they were competing to be the most effective church at being able to connect congregations to Jesus. And that sounds biblical until you realize that Jesus says, I am the way. I'm the way. But these churches are saying, no, we're the most effective road if you want to travel towards Jesus. And there's this competition. And it's not biblical. And that's where churches begin to think more about their church than they do about kingdom issues. It's one example. Or how I once spoke up for an issue of a major injustice in the church that Jesus has a lot to say about in my home church. But it caused people to be stirred up. And so I was told never to speak on it again, even though it's very clearly biblical. Kingdom people thinking about the kingdom of God and justice, but church people often put church above justice, mercy, and truth. It reminds me of that saying where Jesus kind of gives an indictment to the Pharisees, and he says, you focus on stuff like how to tie the garden herbs, mint, cumin, but you overlook the weightier matters, like love, justice, he says. Now, he says, you can focus, like you can keep doing the tithing garden herbs, but don't neglect these weightier things. But some of these weightier things can be controversial and can be risky for a church, especially if you have a big expensive building and you're trying to grow your church. And so today I really want to focus on an evangelism where the goal is making disciples. Like that's the goal. The goal isn't to make converts, the goal is to make disciples. And that's a huge difference. If I would add anything to Howard Snyder's quote, I would say something like, at their best, church people produce converts, but at their best, kingdom people produce disciples. And the goal is not to make disciples, the goal is the goal is not to make converts, the goal is mature disciples. The goal, like Paul said, is to help bring people until they're fully developed, until they're formed into the image of Jesus, to be like Jesus. So, where I want to go from here is, have any of you guys ever heard of a man named Patrick? Saint Patrick. Does anyone know anything about Saint Patrick? Why don't you guys fill in some of the details, those of you that know stuff? Patrick's Day? Yep, St. Patrick's Day. Okay.
Is Kate alive on Disney?
Yes, he is.
Patron Saint of Ireland or something?
Patron Saint of Ireland.
Was he British?
Yes, he was actually British.
Enslaved?
Ding, 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 ding. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
released.
Second.
And he was released somehow. And, how did he get
I thought he
released?
just walked away. God told him to leave him alone.
Good, yeah. Yeah, you guys know a lot of it. Let's fill in some of the details. So he grew up in England. He grew up pretty wealthy. So this was about, in the 300s, this was the 4th century in England. And, but at the age of 16, he was captured by Celtic pirates. And some of them were Irish pirates, you know. And they took him to Ireland and they sold him as a slave. And so for the next 4 years it was, 6 years, he worked for a tribal chief. And it was a Druid chief named Miluik Mokobuin. So that's important, okay? So remember that. And so he was a cattle herder, okay? So he was actually naked, didn't have clothing. He was a cattle herder. And for 6 years he was out there. And it was while in the fields that Patrick found God. and he became a devout Christian during this time. And so he came also during that time to really understand the Irish people and their language, their culture, and he came to actually love them, even though they were his captors. Until one day, God in a dream told him to leave, and God said, I have a boat, go to the coast, and you'll get on the boat and return to your homeland. And so early that next morning, he ran away, and he escaped back to England, which there are just numerous miracles involved in that. Just to be able to get on a boat, going, naked. It's pretty hard to hide when you're naked, And even once he got to England, they were going to kill him because they were all starving. There was no food. And he said, wait, let me pray to God. And he prayed, and this herd of, I think, sheep or pigs all of a sudden comes over the hill, and they have this feast, and he stays alive. Well, then the story gets a little fuzzy. We don't know a lot, actually, at that point. Something, maybe he went to France to gain an education, but he ended up becoming ordained in the church in England, and came to the point of being a pretty important role in the Church of England. So that much we know. And then, at the age of 48, so this is over 20 years later, at the age of 48, he has another dream. And in this dream, a Celtic person is saying to him, we appeal to you, holy servant boy, to come and walk amongst us once more. And so at the age of 48, now this is significant because this is past the lifespan, the expectancy, life expectancy, for a person at that time. So he's old, okay? This would be like today being 88 or something like that, So at this age, he goes to his superiors in the church and he says, God is calling me to be a missionary in Ireland. And at first they kind of thought he was crazy, but he kept persisting, and he finally got permission, and he became bishop to Ireland. And so he returned to Ireland at the age of 48, and he took with him 12 missionaries. It's pretty important for what we're going to talk about, this community approach to evangelism. So Patrick then, already past the life expectancy age, goes on to introduce Christianity to Ireland. There's about 500,000 people in Ireland at that time. He planted over 700 churches. He ordained 1,000 priests. He baptized tens of thousands of people and saw about a third of the island become Christian in the rest of his life. So here's how he did it. First, they form a small community. So first it was him and his 12 missionaries, and they went and they formed a small little community on the edge of one of these tribal settlements. And then they would meet with the people. They'd make friends with them, they'd pray with them, they'd mediate conflicts, they'd welcome them in to worship with them, they'd eat with them, they'd live life with them. And as people would become curious, they would then introduce them to Christ, and they're already in fellowship together. And so they start to disciple, and a church would gather together with these local converts. And then, as the church grew, they would then leave some behind, and at least 12 would then go and plant themselves as a little community on the edge of another tribal settlement. And it began to just spread like this. So I want to go over 4 principles that I think we can learn about evangelism from Patrick. So 1. Okay, first of all, it's a move from individualistic to a community-based approach. I think nowadays, typically, evangelistic training is that of teaching you maybe how to use a tract, or saying, like in my church I learned an acronym for friend, which I don't even